The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome to episode 69 of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author, and we're going to start doing things a little bit differently around here. Just to let you know, we have decided to make the Florida Beer Podcast a weekly show. We are going to drop the time down to about 30 minutes, so that way it's a quick and enjoyable start to your beer drinking week. As a result, some of the interviews, including today's show, will be two-parters. I don't think I'm ever going to do a three-parter. I don't know if that's in the cards for me. But today is going to be part one of a two-part episode. But before we introduce our guests, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We are at Florida Beer Blog. On Facebook at FL Beer Blog. You can find us at FloridaBeerBlog.com, FloridaBeerPodcast.com, and FloridaPodcastNetwork.com, where you can find out all about the new shows that are coming to the Florida Podcast Network. So, as is known by pretty much everybody who is following me on social media, not only do we enjoy beers, which is obvious, but we've got all sorts of other interests in Florida and Florida-based businesses, including the craft tobacco industry. And one of the biggest names in tobacco and cigars, whether you know them or not, is Plasencia. They've been around for many, many decades, many, many generations, and they are one of the biggest and best regarded names in the luxury cigar industry. They are based in South Florida, and they actually are a partner in the Tank Breweries, which is one of the friends of the show. So producer Steve and I went down to the Tank to chat with Tank founder Carlos Padron and Plasencia Vice President Jose Luis Plasencia about a day or maybe even hours before the birth of his child, to talk a little bit about the Plasencia story, their start in Cuba, the multiple times where they lost everything but kept going, and all of the amazing industry-breaking breakthroughs that they have been making to cigars. So this is going to be the first part of our interview with Plasencia Cigars at the Tank Brewing. Enjoy. But I kind of want to get started, which is kind of funny, because as I did a little bit of research on not just Plasencia, but for the cigar industry in general, obviously there's a lot of history, obviously there's a lot of artistry, but the word that kind of keeps showing up more and more is family, which is really funny, since you're about to add a +1 to the Plasencia family as well. Congratulations.
Family is growing.
But I guess, why is the cigar industry so focused on family? Why is it such an important part of who Plasencia is and why it does what it does, how it does?
I don't know, since I was growing up, it's something that it's hard to explain. Looking at the passion that my father has, looking at the passion that my brother has for this industry, it's a very, very interesting industry, since the moment that you're putting a seed on the soil until the cigar is completely made, it's 4 to 5 years approximately. More than 500 different steps involved and more than 200 different pairs of hands. It's hard not to fall in love with this. So while I was growing up, I was look at the passion that my family has for it, and it's something that I want to do when I grow up as well. So I think that speaking with my family, I think that that's what all the people in the industry also feel as well.
And I would add to that I think it adds because it all starts in the farms, right? So at the end of the day, without the tobacco in the farms, you can't go. So it's almost probably the same thing that we hear of generation farmers of any product, right? And people who have owned farms for a long time and the passion that they have with it. So the passion starts without a doubt in the farm. And you put so much work in those fields and you risk so much, with nature, whether it could be a disease, whether it could be, not enough rain, too much wind, who knows, right? And I think because of there, and then you have the whole family working in this thing, you develop that love, you develop that passion, and you realize there's a lot of risk, right? So the whole family has to work at this sometimes, right? It's like, hey, man, there's an issue, we got to go, right? And so that love just keeps getting passed down from one to the other. Luckily, in the tobacco business, unlike some of the farming people still want to work the fields, right? And here we have, sometimes that's not happening, right? It sounds like from what I read, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Before we get into the history of the family and the history of, I guess, the label, which is fascinating, did you feel any pressure to work in the family business? Is it something that, you wanted to go off and be a doctor or a vet or a musician, and then they sort of dragged you back in?
No, I felt the pressure, of course. It's not something that I can deny. But I always was good at math when I was growing up, so I knew that numbers was my thing, and you can relate numbers basically into everything, So I was basically trained to handle the finances of the company and stuff. So I kind of knew where I was going, but since I was growing up, I was understanding deeper what we're actually doing and what's getting more involved and more in love of what we actually do. Because when you are a child, you don't completely understand the whole picture.
But your father says follow your passion, right? So
no, of course. He never told me you need to work here. But
your sister is
my sister is a dentist.
Yeah.
So she feeds our teeth from smoking too much. So she's kind of related in the family business as well. So
yeah, and his uncle is a top-notch colorectal surgeon here in the United States, well known worldwide, to be honest with you. So even your grandfather, right? I guess said, hey, you follow your passions, right? I mean, and then you'll be good. I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I actually had no idea.
Yeah.
And as a dentist, does your sister kind of not really like the family business?
Oh, yeah. She likes it.
No, she likes it. Actually, she is now in charge of our child development centers. Because we open child development centers in the places that we have factories. So our employees will take out their children there and we give them education. But we give them a different education, because it's a third world country, This child's parents deal with a lot of issues. So we teach them, we hire psychologists. So they start thinking from a really small age to start thinking differently. We don't want them to be the next rollers or bunchers or people working in the fields. We want them to be the next doctors, lawyers and everything, because that's how you change a society, And unfortunately, the countries that we are involved in have not has a good political structure. So we want to change that,
That's amazing. And I definitely want to get into that, but I kind of want to take it all the way back to 1865, because that's really where the Plasencia story begins. Can you give us a little bit of rundown about how a farmer in Cuba eventually became the cigar empire that is Plasencia?
Well, it's quite a large story, but I'll try to sum it up as much as I can. Yeah. So, my brothers and myself, we represent the fifth generation of the Plasencia family. It all started in 1865. My family comes from Canary Islands in Spain. So Eduardo Plasencia moved from Canary Islands to Spain in that year in 1865, and he started growing tobacco. The main family business was growing tobacco, prepare the tobacco, and sell the tobacco to the different factories back in Cuba, so they would roll the cigars. He didn't have any children, but his nephew, which was my great-grandfather, the second generation, continued the business, right? The business was growing, buying more farms, selling more tobacco to the Cuban factories, Then his son, which was my grandfather, continued the family business, expanded the family business as well, expanded the farms, tobacco, and everything. But then in the 1960s, with all the political situation that was going through Cuba and stuff, like my family lost all of the farms. My grandfather, was an individual who had worked with tobacco during all of his life. So he has lost everything, and he said, what am I going to do? I need to support my family. You know, my father was 13, 14 years old back then. My uncle was 12 years old back then. So he needed to find a way how to support his family. And the only thing that he knew how to do was to grow tobacco. But in the 1960s, tobacco has started to be grown in Nicaragua. So my grandfather found out about that. And without knowing anything, right? He just grabbed his bags, his children, his wife, went to Nicaragua to start all over again. But he developed such a good reputation in Cuba as a tobacco grower that when he landed in Nicaragua, like an hour or 2 hours after, people knew that Sixto Plasencia was in Nicaragua. So he was offered a job right away.
Just immediately upon landing.
Yeah, because of the good reputation that he had built in Cuba as a tobacco grower, right? So this was the year 1964 when my family officially moved to Nicaragua. My father was 14 years old. He studied high school there. He then went to agriculture school in Nicaragua. He graduated as an agronomist, and then he started working alongside with his father in the tobacco fields. But they were working for other people. Then they managed to save some money, and then they went independently and bought their own farms in Nicaragua in 1970. And the business model was the same, growing tobacco and selling that tobacco to other people. To other cigar factories.
So at this point, they are growing the tobacco. They are not the end producers of the cigars at this point.
From 1865 until 1970 that I'm going through, it's my family we continue to grow tobacco all the time, and like the same business model: grow tobacco and sell the tobacco to the different factories. The 70s we did the same, but we were in Nicaragua already. We were growing and selling the tobacco in different factories. But then, because of the political situation that Nicaragua was going through in 1979, we lost everything twice. And my father didn't want my brothers to experience the same that as he did while he was growing up. So he didn't wait, and he took all of his family, and we went to the neighbor country of Honduras to start all over again. But we kept the same customers because it's relatively the same region, you know. It's like the tobaccos from those regions does not change that much. So we kept the same customers. But in the 1980s, a big pest would attack most of our tobacco crop that is called blue mold. So it would destroy 95% of all the tobacco production that we have. Imagine, and we have some responsibilities to go with the people that we were selling the tobacco to.
By the way, and this destroys it overnight, right? You go to sleep today, and your farm,
next day it's gone.
Everything is fine. Everything is beautiful. Next morning you wake up, and
it's gone.
It's gone.
Completely gone. So the next year happened the same. My dad was accumulating a lot of debts and stuff, but he's working, never giving up. But in the year 1985, he said, with this little amount of tobacco that I'm saving, I'm going to start to produce cigars. So my family officially started producing cigars in the year 1985.
And I'm kind of interested about that because with a lot of other cigar companies, they are purchasing the tobacco from the growers like your father, like generations down the line. Since Plasencia has the fields and starts producing the cigars, does that give them a leg up? Not only knowing the tobacco leaf inside and out because you were there when it was in essence born, does that give them an ability to understand what's been going on to the leaf, what's been going on in the growing fields, and able to blend a better cigar?
Of course, like you are able to control basically the whole supply chain, but also it's kind of risky, you know. It's not the same as growing tobacco as actually come and manufacture a cigar. It's a completely different business. It was a risky approach.
Well, when you're growing and selling tobacco, you have guaranteed customers. When you're growing tobacco and making cigars out of it, now you have to pertain to the end market, to the people buying cigars. They have to like the flavor. They have to like the way the rolls are.
But like the way we started is to manufacture cigars to other people. Like my father was going all over the place to search for customers so he would make cigars for them.
Yeah, it was basically contract cigar rolling.
Exactly.
But the Plasencia name was not
but
on
we
a band
we
yet.
started very slow, like with 2 or 3 couples like rolling cigars and like eventually growing. But in the 1990s, 2 important things happened. In the 1990s, Nicaragua opens up again. We are able to go back, and we received 30% of the land that was confiscated back in the late 70s. And also, Cigar Aficionado came as well. Cigar Aficionado started putting important people on the cover of the magazines with a cigar. So people started related cigar with luxury, with lifestyles and everything. So in the year 1990, to give you an example, I think that 150 million cigars were imported here in the United States. By 1991, it was 700 million cigars. So imagine the cigars for cigars was crazy.
Yeah, it was a big jump. Now, I know I got into the industry in 95, and I think that was when that was 95 to 97 was the peak, right? In the mid-90s, I would tell you.
But like demand was growing like crazy, 1991, 1992, 1993. So my family already had facilities in Honduras and Nicaragua, farms in Honduras and Nicaragua, and we were producing cigars in both countries, right? So like the rest is history, but that's how we grew the way we are. And then my father made smart decisions, bought more lands, bought more facilities, and like the rest is history, as I said, like today we control over 3,500 acres of tobacco. We produce 45 million cigars yearly, roughly. And,
employ like close to 10,000 people, I think, when the peak of the growing season
is as its peak. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I actually want to divert a couple of times, but that is one thing that we were talking about before we started recording. And I know that, Carlos, since I've been at the tank several times, you definitely don't treat your employees like employees. You treat them as extended family, and you definitely care about them as people and not just cogs in a machine.
There's no doubt, and I think a lot of that is learned from my parents as well, but certainly I've learned that on a business side from his father, right? And so I always have a great story to tell when I come in 95, similar to Jose Luis. I have an accounting background initially with a lawyer, and 95 everything is booming, but at the end of that boom and around the year 2000, 1999, 2000, we had all of these workers and demand slowed down. So like Jose Luis said, went 150 million to 700, but then, started dropping to 250. Today it's around 350 million, the imports. And I remember telling his father, we got to let go of some people, right? Because, we got to balance this out and see and he says, yeah, and what are these people going to do? And he says, I got to take care of them, right? And then he says, if you want to let them go, you come over here and you tell these thousands of people. I said, okay, no, let's keep them. It was like, so he said, no, this is a year that we got to sacrifice our profits. We got to sacrifice, some of the gain and some of the stuff that we've been blessed with. And we got to work it through. And slowly we work it through. And we literally just, on both sides, on the beer side and on the cigar side, we experienced the same thing during the pandemic, right? So we immediately took a decision here. We never fired anybody at the tank during the pandemic. We kept everybody. These are all young, and I call them entrepreneurs because they took a risk on our business and our company. And in the cigar side, in the cigar manufacturing, we did everything. These governments can't give stimulus checks, can't give all of this stuff. They don't have that money. So as a company, we basically advanced certain monies, gave certain monies, even at times that they couldn't get to work, right? Because we needed to put at least food on their tables. And so,
our biggest asset is our employees.
Yeah.
And you do a lot of, and that's why I was kind of leading, you do a lot of investing. It's not just, giving them a good job, but you also, like for example, the children of the employees, they are given
Education.
a fantastic education,
Yeah.
healthcare. Hey, can you go into exactly what the workers in your fields and in the plants kind of go through, or what Plasencia provides to its employees? Much more than just a paycheck and maybe healthcare, or an insurance policy.
Well, like I was telling you before, we have child development centers for their employees. So imagine these are people that are very busy, that don't have the facilities to put their children in child cares and stuff. So it's a constant worry for them that where my children are going to be while I'm working.
And sometimes they themselves don't have the education, right? They don't relate, right?
Exactly.
I guess, yeah.
Exactly. So they have a place to put their children in, and we're like giving them proper education, different than the one that their parents receive. We don't want them to be the next rollers or bunchers. We want them to be the next lawyers, the next doctors, and everything. So that's the way that we can change societies, especially in the places that we're located.
And me as a lawyer talk a lot, so he hates it. He probably every once in a while is going to say, "Shut the hell up! Why do you keep interrupting me?" But he's used to me by now, right? So, but I think one of the things that you guys do, Jose Luis, and the school does in particular, is it educates children, but it also educates parents.
Yeah.
To let them know these parents have to be if they want to enroll their children in these schools, they themselves need to be involved with the education of the child. And how long?
If only the American educational system was like that.
Yeah,
It's never going to happen.
yeah. How long has the school's been open, Jose Luis?
Like we opened our first school around 8 years ago.
8 years ago? Yeah.
8
Yeah.
years ago in Esteli.
Right.
There's that we have one of our biggest factories. Then we opened another one in Ocotal, another place in Nicaragua. Then we opened another one in Somoto where we have a pre-industry facilities. And then we opened another one in Jalapa. So today we have 4 child development centers.
And we have clients of ours like Cretex that have helped support the clause, and others that have come and also help us, right? But I think the key, and we're finding it, we don't have long-term results, but from those children's 8 years ago, that basis and that foundation that we created of the children and the parents is what kept them going, saying, "Hey, we've invested in you now," right? Because they've invested their time, they had to sacrifice and all that. And I think at most of the farms, to answer your question, at most of the farms, I think almost all of them, we have medical care facilities, because these farmers, the city is usually a little bit far away, right? Even if it's 10, 15 miles, they don't have cars. So within the farms, we have medical care facilities for them to go check themselves out. The family, especially his mother, who's really an amazing lady of herself. We probably don't talk to her about her as much as we should in all of these interviews. But there's a mother that's the foundation of all of this, right? And his mother's
As usually
amazing.
is with every
Yeah,
family.
without a doubt. But she is so, she likes talk about being behind the scenes, right? She just does her stuff. But she built a church in the middle of the farm, basically for the saints. And she's works with a group of nuns inside of the city for abused girls. So she is all about the community, and nobody almost knows who she is, right? And that's the way she likes it. But she is just an amazing lady, and we just don't. I mean, because the business, they talk about cigars or whatever, but she is really a great lady and an amazing heart. And what she does for the community, I think it's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, to put words into your mouth a little bit, would you say that for the employees at Plasencia, for the employees at the tank, are they really more like an extended family than employees?
Of course, that's how we want them to feel. And if they feel that way, they're going to perform way better than just receiving a paycheck, And you have to build this, like, all these, how can I say it, like, important things that come to their lives, and then make them feel part of part of our family, which they actually are, And without them, we wouldn't be who we are right now. So we got to give them credit for that.
And Nestor, one of the other things that Nestor Jr. does, he's a big, Tony Robbins fan, right? And everything that is educational and motivational. So he has instituted a program, which I think myself, to be honest with you, and probably his father says, come on, let's go work, right? He says, no. And he beat us up with a number of the heads. And so all the managers, right, end up going through training programs to better themselves, hopefully to grow within our company. And most of them do. But his thinking is all of them, as the managers improve and the top tier guys, they're going to pass that knowledge down to the lower guys. So those rollers could hopefully have an opportunity to grow within our company. And if there's not a growth opportunity within our company, fine, go to another company because you develop these skills. And ultimately what he says is by improving them and having them, our quality has gone up. And honestly, our quality and our efficiency has gone up. So
yeah, and for instance, in Esteli, to give you an example, they're like, today I would say more than 100 cigar factories in Esteli, in a place.
I was actually going to ask that question because it seems like tobacco and cigars is a big industry in that region.
Yeah,
so is it kind of like going to Denver and seeing breweries? You just trip over 5 cigar factories on the way to get to a 6th cigar factory.
And there are 100 factories, and it is a town with approximately 200,000 people. So, like, I would say that 85% of the people in Esteli works directly or indirectly in the cigar industry. But that gives employees the facilities that if they don't feel comfortable in one factory, they will go to other one.
No, absolutely.
Like, so there's a lot of inventory turnover. So, and there's a big cost in training people, and you as an organization want to avoid those big costs. So the less employee turnover that you have, the better they're going to perform, the better you as an organization is going to perform as well. So by doing all of these things that we just mentioned, we can say that we have the lowest turnover of employees in a city that is highly changing employees from one another because the demand is there. If I'm a roller and you're my manager and I don't get along with you, I could easily go and the next day I'm working in the factory next door. So all of this builds something special and important for them to make them want to stay with us, to make them want to be part of the family, and most importantly, to grow.
Well, it falls into that you're loyal to your family.
Exactly.
Your family's going to try and help you, promote you, get you where you need to be in your life. But your family's not going to hold you back either.
Exactly.
And when people start understanding that and they see that, it promotes better growth, better synergy in the group. You can't beat that anywhere. You can't find that anywhere either, though.
And that's what happened, honestly, during the pandemic. You generally don't abandon your family, right? And so we found that, granted, to be honest with you, when all of this started as a business, we thought, this is going to last on for a month or something like that, right? And it certainly dragged on for a lot longer, but it went, we just felt that was the right thing to do, right? I mean, we did it here at Plasencia 1865. We did it at all our companies. We didn't let go of anybody, right? Are we allowed to say while the podcast is that we're ordering beers, or is that not okay?
Actually, not only are we going to say that we are ordering beers.
Thank you.
That's actually a good question.
Yeah, the new IPA. Sorry.
You're fine. I guess that actually leads to a good question, because what I want to do is talk about the modern cigar culture. I did not realize, because cigars have been around for how many hundreds of years? I mean, I remember, Titanic, the smoking room, and just Teddy Roosevelt with his cigars and everything. I found it interesting that the industry, I guess, not so much the industry, that the interest in cigars really exploded in the 90s with Cigar Aficionado, with a lot of those things. My first question concerning that is one of image, one of culture, not so much inside the company, but the public face, the advertising and everything. With Plasencia, what kind of image was it? Something that you focused on to create this sort of generational image behind the cigars? And is that an image that you try to create when it comes to putting that public face towards the cigar buying public?
Sure, of course, that's a good indicator that we've been in the business for over 150 years. So, like, as we advertise our product, people would say, hey, these people actually know what they're doing, you know? And, like, we've messed up a lot of tobacco. We messed up a lot of tobacco crops. We've messed up a lot of cigars, but that's what has made us who we are today, you know? And learning. And tobacco is so complex, so different. Imagine what I said, since the moment I put the seed on the soil until the moment I have a cigar ready to smoke, 4 to 5 years happen. So there's a lot of error potential that can happen over there, you know? So, like, we're constantly learning and making our products better.
Yeah, and that's what it took us a long time to get it. I mean, and we learned a lot from our clients. And so remember, we still manufacture for a number of clients. So our image has to portray not only, you know, quality that all starts with the ground, but it's our image for us and for our clients and for the industry as a whole, right? It's a overall very friendly industry. We all strive. I think the image for everybody is striving is for quality, right? And over the years, it keeps improving, right? And everybody, it's competitive, but it's a friendly competition. You'll never find one of our sales guys ever saying anything bad about any other brand, right? Whether we make it or not. Even though I think, you know, majority of tobacco, any product that comes from Nicaragua, there's a, you know.
And it's very similar to the craft beer world, where 100%. You're learning from your
That's why we got
brewers.
into the craft beer world. Yeah.
It's a very small world, small community, but you're still learning everything you can from everybody.
And you're dependent on nature. So, I mean, in the craft beer world, it's even more so, right? But because, you know, the consumer understands that, you know, maybe it could be a little bit different here or there, right? You know, it's a handmade product. I mean, it's amazing, right? So, you know, but with our brand, when we started this, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, it had to, you know, we wanted to continue. Part of the thing is to continue to educate the consumer about it's a lifestyle, right? For us, it's a lifestyle, and for us, it's important to show that, right? And to you know, because generations come and, you know, all the press talks about tobacco and bad. Tobacco's bad. This is bad. For us, we needed to educate. It's, you know, it isn't. We don't inhale this product, right? It's a lifestyle. We sit around and have a great time.
You also don't have the additives that cigarettes get. You don't have all that extra oomph they put into them.
It is a handmade process. Imagine everything is done by hand. Like, we don't call the people that are rolling cigars and manufacturing cigars we call them artisans, because it's an art. It's something that is done completely by hand. I want to encourage all the people to try to roll an actual cigar and see how they're going to perform. You know, it's a difficult task to do.
Mine would unravel in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But that actually...
By the way, Nestor Jr., that you said that started his would unravel too, by the way. Nowadays. He'll get it, but, and Jose Luis, I don't know, do you know how to roll a cigar?
I've learned, like, when I started, but, like, if you put me to roll a cigar, I would not do it. It's something that requires a lot of practice.
Hey there, fellow Florida beer enthusiast. We now have an official Patreon. In case you are unfamiliar, Patreon is a great way for a community to support the creators of the content you love, like the Florida Beer Podcast. If you're enjoying the content we bring you on this show, or any of the shows on the Florida Podcast Network, you can help ensure that content keeps coming through for a small monthly donation equal to the price of a couple cups of coffee a month. So for just a few lattes, you can make a real difference. And the first goal of FPN's Patreon program is to help me get a better mobile setup to use whenever I can start traveling to great breweries here in the state of Florida. So if today's episode brought you valuable insights and information, please help see that these episodes keep coming by becoming a patron. Head to patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network to support the show, and it comes with some pretty sweet benefits. Want access to bonus extras? Nostalgic for these old school radio shoutouts? Lover of good quality merchandise? Well, not only will your monthly contribution help me grow the show, but you'll get some cool stuff in return. So please head to patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network for further details to become a patron. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network. You You can also find the link right there in the show notes or by visiting FloridaBeerPodcast.com. Thank you in advance for your continued support. That is part one of our interview with Jose Luis and Carlos. Check back next week when we will have part two of our amazing interview, where we'll talk about the present and the future of everything going on with Plasencia. The Florida Beer Podcast is a production of FloridaBeerBlog.com. You can find us at FloridaBeerBlog.com, FloridaBeerPodcast.com. We're on social media at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter. We're at FL Beer Blog on Facebook, or you can write us directly at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. The Florida Beer Podcast is also a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network. And if you're interested, you can take a look at our closed Facebook group exclusively for superfans of all the shows on the network. All you have to do is search for FPN Insiders on Facebook to join our group, leave comments, tell us the latest brewery that you visited, get early scoops on new news, and we have a lot of great shows coming to the network and more. So you can find us at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com or search FPN Insiders on Facebook. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich, field producer is Steve Pekala, executive producer and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate us, subscribe to us, leave a review on the podcasting app of your choice. It helps others find this podcast, and tell everyone you know. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening, and drink Florida Craft.